cults. Now that I have your attention, let's talk about the weirdest town in Colorado. And in a state that has festivals for both a headless chicken and a frozen dead guy, that's saying something. If you thought Boulder was a little too much, well, let me introduce you to Crestone. Before I go on, I will say I've given Crestone a fair amount of shit in the past. And as you watch this, you're going to learn a little bit why. But to the people of Crestone, I would just like to say, you take it like champs. At least you guys can take a joke. And look at it this way, at least everyone in the San Luis Valley knows you're here. Sometimes we forget Sanford even exists. This town is one of the most, if not the most, unique town in Colorado. If not a good portion of this country, actually. There's things about Crestone you can't find anywhere else, including a funeral practice in which this is the only place in the United States it's even allowed. But before we get to the funky shit, we gotta go over its history. From boom and quick bust mining town, to failed development, to new age mecca, to a backdrop behind an HBO cult documentary. Hell of a progression. So the history of Crestone actually starts a little bit before the town of Crestone, with something called the Luis Maria Baca Grande, or otherwise just known as the Baca Grande 4, or the Baca Grande. Now, I'm only gonna lightly dive into the history of the Baca Grande because honestly, there's so much information there, it could have been its own video at some point. But essentially, what it was Luis Maria Baca had a grant of land down near Las Vegas, New Mexico, or what would be Las Vegas, New Mexico today. And that was given to him by the Mexican government. And then when the US bought the area, it ran afoul of a couple other land grants the US government had given out. And after a lot of court wranglings, like I said, a lot of story there, eventually the court awarded Mr. Baca's family land grants of equal size to what they lost, or proportional value. And one of those would be the Baca Grande number 4, which is what you see out here. Now, I understand that don't look like much, but you know what does? That. See, the Baca Grande also extends up on part of these mountains where Crestone is. And you know what they eventually found up there? Gold. So, just like Creed, Del Norte, Summitville, all the other mining towns in the area, the town of Crestone quickly sprang to life. In the 1880s, gold would be discovered in those mountains that are right there behind me, you can kind of see. Actually, they surround this area, and several mining camps would form, and the town of Crestone would pop up, and southern Colorado had yet another boom town, and it would grow very large, very quick. It would get a post office, then a city hall, then the railroad would make it here, and usually that's like the lottery ticket for a town when a railroad gets there. However, they've quickly discovered there was a very low amount of high quality gold ore in the mountains to make anyone want to stick around. So just as quickly as Crestone popped up, it would near become a ghost town. So when I'm talking like almost dried up, I'm talking going to like the 1950s and 60s, there was like maybe 20 people in the town of Crestone. It didn't completely die off like say Summitville did and several other ghost towns, but it got damn close. It was on its deathbed. But you know what you do when you're on your deathbed? You pray. And you know what? The gods answered them. All the gods. Tell me if you've heard this story before. A rich land developer moves to town, buys up everything, and quickly over time, everything goes absolutely to shit. Good news is, that's not the story I'm telling this time. There was a rich land developer, and they did come in and buy this up, and then try to turn it into a fancy development, but they failed. In fact, like much of Colorado, land developers keep coming down here to southern Colorado and keep trying to make these developments. But unlike the rest of Colorado, they keep failing. And you want to know why? Because this place is a freezing desert. Why would you even try to do that here? However, from the grave of the failed development would rise this. The Baca Grande grants. And this is where things are gonna get a little bit more interesting. In the mountainous area just south of Crestone, in an area plumb full of prickly pear cactus as this whole field is right now, a rich Canadian politician and his wife would buy up the pieces of the shattered failed development and turn it into something called the Baca Grande. You see, this man's wife was very into the New Age spiritualism that was gaining prevalence in the 1970s. And you see, she had this idea, and she talked her husband into selling away these plots of land on this grant to New Age spiritualist groups, because you know what? She wanted this area to become a spiritualist religious mecca. So she invited pretty much all the religions. All the religions. And she would be successful at this, honestly. In fact, so successful that along the side of this mountain behind me, just dotting in the landscape within the trees, are stoops and shrines and prayer circles and just about anything you could think of. It was so successful that the town of Crestone went from about 20 or less people to a few hundred people, which, yes, I know that's not much, but it breathed some life back into the town. And that's just a couple hundred people in the town proper. That's not counting all the people that live in the various compounds and churches and shrines and temples that dot this mountainscape. Very quickly, this town gained a reputation with the rest of the local towns down here in the San Luis Valley. And look, I'm Norse pagan myself, so I'm not going to sit here and like shit on someone's religion or make fun of it in bad taste. I got my beliefs, people have theirs. I'm cool with that. I'm just saying that to the rest of us that live in the San Luis Valley, it is very easy for us to spot who's from Crestone. I mean, some more than others, mind you, but there is a reason we call them Crestonians. Now, with a wide variety of beliefs and spiritualities comes a wide variety of funeral practices. And this is important because Crestone has one distinction that no other town in the United States can claim, and that this is the only area that allows you to have open air cremation. That's right, funeral pyres. That's correct. If you want to go out like a Viking, you can do that here in Crestone. However, there are some caveats. You have had to have lived in at least the county of Saguache for several months, and there's a couple other small stipulations that you got to meet before they allow you to do it. But hey, this is the only place you can. Now, there is something important to note about the Baca Grande and its sale to all these spiritualists and religions. It turned out to be a really good thing. For decades now, since about the 80s, we've been fighting corporations and my own state on trying to pump water out of this valley to either northern Colorado or California. Each time it's come on the ballot, it has been shot down near unanimously. No one here wants that. We may live in a desert, but there is a massive aquifer beneath this near entire valley, and it is some amazing water, if I don't say so myself. Its filtration system is top in the line. Like, you cannot get better tasting water than you can get out of the springs that come from this valley floor. That, however, means a lot of other people want that water, and they've been trying to find a place where they can run a pipeline through the mountains to get it out of here. But there's a problem. No one here wants that. Like I said, it gets shot down every time they put it on the voting block. However, if a farmer or landowner or someone was greedy enough or tired enough and just sold the land and water rights, it would give either whatever entity's trying to do it access to that water to get it out of here. But they still have a problem. They'd have to build a pipeline. And it is so egregiously unwanted down here, they would spend decades in court fighting to drag that pipeline across every single property it needed to go. However, the Baca Grande has the easiest access to that water. And if they could pump it from right here, they could just run it right over Poncha Pass through the Baca Grande without needing to go through any of those battles. However, they've never been allowed to because spiritualists and hippies have become the first line of defense in our water rights here. When it comes to religion and spirituality, there's a fine line between religion and spirituality on one side and cults on another. And there are several groups out there that will walk a tight line across it and occasionally hop over into cult territory. But then again, there is always a group that likes to vault the fuck over that line. If you've ever seen the HBO documentary, Love Is One, well then you know what is coming next. Back in 2021, right around the COVID era when everything was going crazy, we would get a story in the local area about cops discovering a cult up here. And to be honest, it was kind of a joke because we're like, oh, a cult in Crestone, tell me what's new. But, holy shit. Police would be called to a house on the outskirts of Crestone. And what they would discover there would lead to a multi-hour HBO documentary as they entered the house domicile and discovered that the local residents of that house were basically praying at the altar of a blue mummy. And the story only gets stranger from there. You see, there was this group called Love Has Won, led by someone that called herself Mother God, like the living embodiment of God or some shit. To be honest, I never quite got what they were going for there, because it really seemed like they were using it as a big excuse to do drugs and drink, which the leader of the group, the Mother God, did a fuck ton of. And this story, mind you, takes place in more than just here. I think it goes all the way to Oregon, some batshit craziness in Hawaii. Like, if you want the full and complete story, watch Love Has Won on HBO. And just remember, while you watch that, I live 40 minutes from them. But back to the story at hand, so you can get the gist of it. After they were kicked out of Hawaii for claiming she was the living embodiment of a god over there, yeah, that didn't go so well. She got chased back to Crestone, or I should say on the outskirts of Crestone, because this group was too crazy for Crestone. They did not want them in the town limits. So they were outside in between here and Moffett. Now, when they came back, this lady was basically dying of alcoholism and drug abuse, but she was said treating alcoholism and drug abuse with colloidal silver. If you've never heard of this supplement, all you need to know is taking too much of it over too long a period of time will turn your skin a Smurf shade of blue. Like, it's fucking crazy. If you've ever seen the pictures online of people that take it, or haven't, I should say, Google them. They're blue. Anyways, this lady would eventually pass on from said alcoholism and untreated drug addiction, and her followers would then wrap her corpse in like Christmas lights and a blanket and make an altar to it in their house, where they were waiting for the aliens to show up and bring her back to life so they could be taken away. And that's when the cops stepped in and discovered this. And that same summer that news broke, we also had a shooting at a protest in the center of Alamosa, and a burn pit that was be used as body disposal for a murderer was discovered down near Las Houses. It was a crazy summer. With all that being said, Crestone is a beautiful town with some interesting people. Mind you, some are more interesting than others, but it is still a cool town. There's lots to do around here, especially if you're into the outdoors and have a lot of hiking or mountain climbing experience, because the mountain peaks around here are dotted with some of Colorado's hardest 14ers to climb, like the Crestone Needle. So this may not be an area for beginners to get their first 14er, but if you got some experience under your belt, this can be a challenge you may want to partake in. However, just be mindful of how long you stay here, because if you're here for too long, you're going to catch a contact high. Now, if you don't mind, I'm going to go see if that unicorn is real or not. Oh, fuck. This better not be real.